of life is a spiral, whirls upon whirls, over and over, writ large and small. We are the turning gears of the clock, the heroes and heroines, spinning through space-time, through myths and rituals and stories. We spiral through love and war, birth and death, marked by the myth makers as departure, initiation, and return. And even when everything is lost, there is the spiral. I found it in myself and my fellow travelers when my sister died. The shape of our journey through the darkness. And here is our myth.
My daughters were here, and I was here, and we had a nurse's assistant, and she was suffering. She was agitated. She threw up bile, black bile, and the nurse's aide got down on her knees and started praying. And I gathered my daughters together and I said, "Girls, I think we should make things easier for Mama. She won't be alive very much longer. She's suffering. Why don't we make it easier for her?" And they said, "Okay, Dad." And I got the morphine from the refrigerator, and I gave her the extra dose and opened her mouth and put it in her cheeks and gave her the extra dose, and she shortly thereafter calmed down. And an hour or so after that, stopped breathing. And I got in bed with her and held her. I didn't want to let her go.
She was in the middle of, she was preparing for my birthday. And the last thing she did was go to the beauty parlor so she would look right. And she was coming home from there when the accident happened.
Sheila didn't seem like she was going to pass imminently. She really didn't. And they took the respirator out, and she looked at me. She was still bald. She was hooked up to every machine imaginable. And she looked a little frightened, and she just said, as best as she could get the words out, because I'm sure her throat was all dried out from the respirator and from being sedated and everything. She looked at me and she just said, "I love you."
I didn't realize he was that sick at the end. and that he wasn't going to pull through this time. And I knew when that St. Catherine's number flashed on that screen, I shut the TV, answered the phone, started to get my sweats on. She said he had a restless night. I said, I'll be right there.
One thing I remember most is my oldest daughter. My mother loved her. That was her first grandchild. And her son, Nate, who's now just 3, my mother couldn't get enough of him. Like, I would have to go there to pick her up just to take her to see him, even if it was for 20 minutes. She just like needed the Nate fix. So when she was coming close, you know, I called Leah and I said, you know, you can still get here. I think you should come. And my mom was holding on and holding on.
And I stood by her bedside every day, and I told her the story of her life and how we met, and I held her hand, I kissed her, and told her that she brought so much joy to my life. She was my best friend and my rock, and that hopefully we'd meet again.
I had son on one side, daughter on the other, and the grandkids. They were all boo-hooing.
When she went up to my mom and whispered in her ear, Grammy, I'm here, it's Leah. She took her final breath, and that was what she waited for.
And we were all there when he took his last breath at 12:15. So, yeah.
I had left a message for my mother. She hadn't answered at a time where I would have expected her to. And then there was a buzz on my phone from the security desk that there were some police. And then they knocked on my door, and they didn't have to say anything. I just knew something, that my mother was gone. I didn't know how till they told me.
And we got the call that she had passed. So we went up those awful 5 floors to the ICU at St. Peter's, and it was just so bizarre to see her inert, to see her. She was still warm, but I can't describe how surreal and bizarre that was to see her not alive.
After the bedrock shatters and the tsunami comes, we find aid with the supernatural. They come as the hospice nurse and the funeral director and the protective utterers of prayer. In the mythical world, they are the ferrymen, the psychopomps who travel between this world and that. Many are beside us for only a moment, but some stay on to counsel and guide us, to help us make sense of wherever here is and wherever there will be.
When you've been through the process of taking care of or experiencing the death of a loved one, that's a trauma in itself. And that the way that the brain processes trauma is to go back to the most traumatic, harrowing images repeatedly.
How come I'm visualizing him in the coffin? It's very difficult remembering how healthy he was. I'd come home from work, he'd be out there mowing the grass. Well, the house would be vacuumed. The dishes would be done. What do you want for supper? I'll go get something. This was a hale and hearty individual for a lot of years. A lot of years. But why can't I see that all the time?
So the most painful memory I have is to see her unconscious in the ICU, in bed with those central lines. It's a horror.
She was not conscious when the police got there. So, you know, they say it's a blessing that she went right away.
Oh my God, what if we were there? Maybe we could have saved her. You know, maybe she would still be with us.
I feel that maybe I should have been more proactive I did go with her to everything. The doctors weren't finding out what was wrong.
How did it all of a sudden, you know, just become she was dying in 2 days?
She passed away within 5 months of diagnosis, and she had been misdiagnosed. And so I have a lot of anger, and I have a lot of guilt, and not a lot of guilt, but a certain degree of guilt. I am Jewish. I guess that comes with the territory.
I was even angry with myself at one point. Why did I ever start a relationship with a man that was 15 years older than me? What was I thinking?
Before it was ever even a hint that she wasn't going to make it, but we were very close to the time that she would pass, I said, Sheila, I apologize for anything I've ever said or done to hurt you. And she said, forgiven and forgotten.
I was sad because when we had talked about death, she made a point of saying she would like me to hold her hand. So I felt horrible that I wasn't there to hold her hand.
By the way, I could never use the term passing for Gretchen. People say that their loved ones passed, and I have this vision of passing. She died. Her life ended. There is no metaphor that I can think of that makes it easier than saying she died. It was so disorienting, and again I'll invoke that word surreal, that I probably felt like, you know, I was living in a dream or a nightmare. Everything seemed distorted, time seemed distorted, space around me seemed distorted. It was difficult for me to get any comfort because I was like feeling like I was losing my mind.
And I wasn't prepared. So it felt, to be suddenly shocked by that. You know, this was the second death where I was notified by police.
I remember the man handing me a box of tissues. And I remember being there for about an hour and just crying and talking and crying and talking. He says to me, "You're not crazy." He said, "This is not abnormal."
Day after day after day for, I don't know how long. Prefer not to remember, but it was, I just couldn't believe that I could cry that much.
You're experiencing a reactive depression. You're reacting to your situation.
Pain was so persistent and ever present. Morning, noon, and night. The only refuge I had was sleep. So I know some people react to grief by not sleeping, and some people, like me, that's all I would want to do was sleep because that was the only refuge.
I don't want to admit this. I would question, well, what's the point of going on? I don't have to. Now that she's gone, nobody's going to really, it's not going to matter. And I'm not so motivated. I've really turned that around, but that's how I felt for a while.
You know, I think you just go through that no matter how good or bad your life might be, because it's just a function of we know we're all going to die. And when we're in that frame of mind where it's become so difficult.
I could say, what's the point? That was more, you know, shortly after my mother died.
You wonder whether we're here as evolutionary flukes of the universe, or whether there's an intent and a purpose for our lives, and is everything fate or free will? And it's just so impossible to answer, and the question persists, and the question can drive you crazy.
I think everybody at some point of their life, not that they are suicidal, but they think about it. Like, we struggle so hard to make something of ourselves and, you know, to reach these degrees, to become an astronaut or whatever, and we're going to die. So why does anybody do it? Like, who are they trying to prove, you know, look what I achieved? You know, at the end, who do we have to tell that to? You know, the history books that are written and everything that all those people achieved, does it matter? It was history, and it's over, because they're gone.
It strikes to the most inner, deepest fear, the most inner, deepest spiritual questions that you long to have answered. And I suppose I'm a little jealous of people of faith, like Sheila's parents, because they have a certainty that this is a plan and it's God's will, and they have this absolute sense of certainty that while they miss her, that this was supposed to happen.
So the other side of me says, just let everything go and do what you want to do. Like, if you really only had a number of days left.
Upon the road of trials, we find confusion, not only in the new and unfamiliar land, but in the duality of our company. Trusted loved ones and friends show us their dark side. We find ogres and hags and the callousness of destruction when we least feel we can bear it. And while some gift us an unexpected boon of kindness, the road of trials is long.
I think in terms of tide. Maybe it's when the tide goes out and the death occurs, much of the family dysfunction is exposed.
I had this friend I've known since childhood. We've been friends since about the first grade. But he came out with this line that I couldn't believe. It was 6 weeks after Sheila passed away. And I started to talk about Sheila with him, and he says, "You're still grieving over this?" Like he was incredulous, like 6 weeks after, and you're still talking about this? So he is my friend no longer, because a 50-year friendship, after saying something spectacularly insensitive and stupid as that, I just couldn't deal with it. I just wanted to really punch his lights out.
The way and the things that were said, it was just so like, that must be the real you.
I expected more of certain relatives to pitch in. There's so much legal stuff. Yeah, I don't want to get too specific with people, but I could have used a lot of help and more support, more emotional support.
And to have his daughter ask me, "Well, how are you? Are you moving on with life?"
You know, you just changed my opinion of you.
I remember the first time I went to a dinner party after Gretchen died, and I was the odd man out. And I went in and I was astounded. No one said anything about Gretchen. I was so upset.
I'm saying this as a sarcastic New Yorker. That's another bonus about the whole grief factor in losing people, is that there's so many components to it. And one is that you experience this weird phenomenon of people that you expect are going to be very supportive of you are not always very supportive of you. And people that you are practically strangers that you don't expect anything from really come through.
I realized subsequently that it was my responsibility to say, God, Gretchen would really have loved to have been here tonight. And she loved your food, and she loved you guys. And I really miss her tonight. I miss her being here. I think if I had been more open, it would have opened them up to be able to talk about it.
In the bereavement group, we were presented with a Bill of Rights for mourners, and that we have the right to expect things, and we have the right to say things and share things. And at the end of that session, I spoke about the fact that you could flip that and say that the people who aren't grieving have rights, and they can be cold, and they can not participate or want you to shut up. They have the right. And being presented with that list helped me accept people not helping me, not wanting to listen.
You know, it's like if somebody is able to give you just this much, take it and say thank you and move on.
I guess before I experienced this loss, I didn't know the best thing to say to somebody who was recently bereaved, but I know what not to say, now. And conversely, I was just coming out of an office for a psychiatrist who was dealing with my depression, and he was about as warm and fuzzy as a shower curtain or a tree bark or something. And there was a postal worker, a woman delivering the building's mail, and she says, "How's everything today?" And I said, "Okay." She says, "No, it isn't." She says, "I can tell. What's the matter?" And we spoke for about an hour, and she told me about her losses, and she gave me things to give me hope and faith. And it was an amazing moment where I was just this total stranger, and I'll never forget it, and I'll always be so appreciative of her.
One of the metaphors that I like to use is about the concept of shattered assumptions. It can be shattered assumptions of the way the world works, and also a shattered sense of identity. So if you can imagine, somebody taking a baseball bat to a window and shattering it into 1,000 pieces, how do you take all those shattered pieces and put them back together again into a coherent whole that's like a stained glass window?
In the void of all we have known, we are not the same form we were before. The questions of the chrysalis arise. Who am I now, and who will I be?
You feel it on such an intense level that it's just indescribable. I'm sure it's commonly referred to, and I could certainly say that it just feels like an amputation. It feels like part of you is cut away, and you're somehow not whole.
The expression of your right-hand person, I lost my right hand, my left hand, and my heart.
It's not only the fact that I feel like I lost him, but I feel like I lost us. Oh boy. I feel like I lost us.
With my mother, she was the one person who cared about me completely. And that's, I don't have anyone to that extent. I have some very important people in my life, but
I feel very strongly that we identify ourselves not only by our self-image, but the way those closest to us, those who love us, see us. And it forms part of our identity. You say, I am part of a couple. I am part of a marriage. I am part of, she is part of me. I am part of her. I am part of my dad. My dad is part of me. Same with all the people in your life that you admire and love.
I know it very well because I had a love affair of 53 and a half years. We were balanced so in our yin and yang. We were quite different, but we added to each other in immeasurable ways.
You become used to this idea that your mates, lovers, best friends, caretakers, mentors, teachers. She was all that and more. She was my personal Lucille Ball. She was funny as heck. She was a combination of Lucille Ball and Daffy Duck.
Gretchen was my historian. She was so smart. She was artistic. She had great sensitivity. She had fabulous taste. And these were qualities that I didn't have very much of, and she added to my life so much. And
when she passed, I felt lost. I was her caretaker.
Do you know what my son said to me? Ma, you're still young. I said, Jim, don't even go there. I said, because you know what? I don't want to take care of anyone else in my lifetime other than my grandchildren. That's it. I won't do it again. And I know, never say never.
Yeah, the caretaker thing, you do feel that sense like you get used to that role and you kind of feel responsible for this person's comfort and life.
That's exactly the first thought that went through my head. What do I do now? Who do I take care of now? Yep. Yep. And do you know what the answer to that is? I take care of myself. That's my answer.
So I suppose it's so disorienting when that person leaves your life. Sometimes you don't even have to know them personally. I've had people, who were great influences on my life in terms of how I think or what I'm doing for a living or, just my philosophy that pass away, and it breaks my heart. So I think we do define ourselves in terms of people that we love. It forms us. In that way, we're totally interconnected.
From somewhere within us or without, we are given proof that we are still connected. In ways and to forces we don't fully understand, the movement of our grief yields a moment of grace. A dream, a sign, a feeling of presence comes when we least expect it, and proves our love survives, no matter how transformed it is. There is hope.
When Sheila and I got married, our wedding song was "I'll Stand By You." I know this might sound crazy or straining credibility, but as my parents and I were leaving the hospital, over the loudspeakers in the lobby, they were playing "I'll Stand By You." And that was amazing.
One of the gals in the group, her husband was 52, he had brain cancer, and she had gone to Parents' Weekend. Her son's away at college, so she and her daughter went. And she said there was a number her husband always played, 105. And they were in the hotel room, apparently, and she woke up and she looked over at the clock and it said 105. She freaked. She couldn't believe it. She said 105.
Ever since we were kids, we always looked for praying mantises. So for a praying mantis to appear that day I went to her apartment, it was just, I don't know, it kind of gives you some comfort, you know, knowing that there's a way that they still can connect with us even though they're not here.
Sheila was Colombian, so we had a Botero print from the Museum of Antioquia up in the living room. And when I woke up on the anniversary of her passing, that framed poster of Botero, which hung above the couch, had fallen down onto the couch. It's never done that before. I took a picture of it on the couch. It didn't shatter, didn't break, it just fell right down. And I put it back up after I took the picture, and it hasn't fallen down again since.
How many times I see a cardinal? I haven't fed those damn birds in months. Francis used to be out there every week, filling 3 feeders, filling the water fountain, okay? I have a picture of him in snow this high, walking it all the way out to the shed and getting the seed because that's where we kept it. So now I keep it in an airtight, sealed plastic container in my sunroom. I said, those damn birds know it's there and that I haven't been out there to feed them because guess what? They were all lined up on the table. Every one of them. The blue jays, the cardinals, the whatever, the sparrows, the thrushes, even that lousy woodpecker who I hated, right? They're all lined up on that table. Not only were they lined up on the table, but they had the nerve to come right to the door when the screen was open. I said, could you believe that? He must have sent them. He's telling me, get the hell out there and feed those birds. Yeah, I know it. I absolutely know it.
I'm waiting for signs. I would buy that. I would believe in it. But I'm not going to pretend something.
You wonder sometimes if you're just doing this from desperation and...
We have to somehow justify all these things as that's a symbol from who left us.
It plagues you. It can make you crazy. Yeah. But I try to continue to do things in her memory, in her honor. There's a plaque. She worked for Visiting Nurse Service. There's a plaque up in the Brooklyn office with her picture and some details about her, and I'm very proud that that's there.
And she's buried just 5 minutes from where I live at the Chilmark Town Cemetery, and I visit her all the time, and I pass her and wave a couple times a day.
I miss her, and I'll go buy her photo, my favorite photo of hers, where she's got a look of approval. It's like, thanks, I'm glad you did that.
That letter that my mother had written, I had rolled it up in a piece of palm, and I keep it in the bottom of my pocketbook, and I carry it with me everywhere. Even if I switch pocketbooks, and now, you know, if I go travel, whatever pocketbook I take, that letter goes with me. And every year, Palm Sunday, I change the palm.
Well, now I have a memento of hers in my pocket. I used to just have, I had my sister's memento, and now I have the two together.
I have a Franciscan cross hanging in my car. I often drive along and touch that. But I haven't had him come to me in a dream yet. That's very interesting, because I know people have said that.
I did not have dreams about my mother in the first year. And they've started to come in the last bunch of months. They're often, with her being the age of when I was in my 20s, and they're sort of wishful dreams because they include my father, so instead of them being divorced, they're together, and the family unit is there, and it's friendly. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, because I can remember way back when I was a kid, my grandmother died, I was 7. And I remember her coming to me in a dream, sitting at the edge of my bed and telling me it's okay. Yeah. I don't ever remember my dad coming to me. I miss him. I'm sorry.
I've felt with both my sister and my mother, their essence, their soul passing through me at the times of their death. I didn't know it at the time. But when I looked back, with my sister, I was asleep and I jolted awake. And with my mother, I was talking to a friend, and there was an issue about a conflicting date. I was supposed to visit my mother when I had made prior plans. And this feeling came through me, so powerful. It was way more about it. It was more than what the situation warranted. And then when I found out that was the moment, that was the timeline, I felt that was her soul passing through me, and I don't know how that works, but I believe.
So that gave me some hope that maybe she crossed over to something that we could never really understand till we do.
We have arrived at a point where we live in two worlds. The world of matter, in which our loved one was by our side, and the world of energy, in which they are with us still. To balance the two is our task.
It's amazing. It's been 5.5 years, and I still have trouble emotionally, even though my life is wonderful. But the emotions are so deep that triggers of all kinds brings out this feeling of sadness.
We had gone on a cruise, and this was the cruise that we had taken my mom on, but this time she wasn't going to be with us. When I got onto the ship with my husband, who is about as emotional as this wall here, we stood right in the same galleyway, you know, once they let us on the ship, and I just lost it. And I started crying uncontrollably. I can remember just the anger and the frustration and the sadness, so many emotions, like in that instant, I couldn't believe it.
For some reason, I have a trigger that is making me kind of relive some of the bad thoughts, also think of some of the good times, and it's, I suppose, what I could consider a relapse of grief.
Some things trigger tears, and some things even trigger anger towards him.
Last year was treacherous.
The first year?
Yeah, that first anniversary.
Like walking into the Thanksgiving dinner, you know, especially at my sister's where my mom was when she passed, it was like hard. So I'm gonna lose it again.
I would celebrate with her. I went through the routine that we would go through, and I pictured her there, and that was very sad. That was very difficult, and the same goes for her birthday.
You know, you walk in, and when I first walked in, my sister was there. And I felt bad for her because she was with my mother every day. So she must have been devastated because whenever we went out, my mom was always on her arm. She took her everywhere. So she had no partner anymore. So that was a big change for her. And that, even her coming to like the functions alone, getting out of her car, you know, she'd always go around and get my mom out and she'd walk in holding her arm. That was so hard for us to see. All of us would just like have to compose ourselves before we went over to her. But that Thanksgiving, which was right after she passed, I was like, nobody wanted to be there. Nobody wanted to be there.
The last probably 5 or 6 years, Frances and I did nothing on New Year's Eve. We were home, just the two of us. We used to go out to early dinner, and then we were home. And the last couple of years, forget it. I tell him, don't wake me up at midnight. I'm going to sleep. And he woke me up at midnight. I'll never forget it. This last New Year's, he woke me up at midnight. He said, are you going to call your son? So I called my son. It was like, I don't know, 12:15. And my son said, you're up? Because you knew darn well not to call me, right? I said, yeah, I'm up. Frances woke me up. Oh, well, Happy New Year. Talk to you tomorrow. Okay, fine, hang up. But see, no matter where I was in my life, on New Year's Eve, I always called my parents. Always. Yeah. Yeah, I just, I don't know. I used to say to Frances, I hope my parents are in heaven. I hope they're not elsewhere. I'm going to be very disappointed if they are. I know, right? Here I am crying. Thank God my father's dead, 1997, May 5th. It just brings up everything. It brings up everything.
Recently I did a production, and on my answering machine I leave a message for reservations, and my mother would always call and leave a message that she wanted 50 reservations. She would make that joke, and I missed that. It's just sort of an unexpected trigger.
The holidays were always a big deal for us. When I was a child growing up, there were always people sleeping in sleeping bags in the living room. We had family. We had a lot of family. And now, I tell my son, you're my family. I have nobody.
When my mom had her own place, her own apartment, every season, whether it was St. Patrick's Day, Veterans Day, every holiday that was on the Hallmark calendar, she had a decoration for. And like that to me is amazing, because it could be just ducks at Easter and Halloween stuff. Whenever we would go to her apartment, we always knew what holiday was coming. And that, that's something that I just have no interest in. And I think about that with each holiday.
There's a part of me that would rather not remember all those dates because they are very evocative. And some dates, of course, are worse than others.
Especially if they had wonderful marriages and wonderful relationships. That the triggers of the birthdays, anniversaries, restaurants.
Sometimes the grief, is still there, but a bit softer, and sometimes the grief really hits you like it happened yesterday.
And it's normal and natural, and it's okay.
No matter how many years I think pass, my father's been dead for since '94, and every once in a while there'll be a trigger, but it doesn't make you as sad as time goes on. You think about it, and it passes.
And the other thing about triggers is the randomness of triggers. There are conscious aspects of the grief process, but like an iceberg, there's this massive amount of unconscious grieving that's going on at the same time. And so triggers are a reflection of this activity and this awareness beneath the surface of our conscious awareness.
It has been said, God made the world round so we couldn't see too far down the road. And so it is, round in many directions and in many motions. Even though it has been many turns of the clock, I cannot tell you if I passed through grief or grief passed through me. Only that, like my fellow travelers, I could not see around the roundness, that the spiral would deliver me to another beginning, a small freedom at first, to live again, to live having been changed and know it, making peace with the shape of things to come and what has been.
I remember feeling that I wanted to hold on to grief because it was kind of a proof of the intense feelings of love that you have. And to let the grief go was possibly to let that relationship go.
Even after a year, the one thing that I still want to do is pick up the phone and call her. And even after a year.
Sort of think of it as a life sentence, not in the sense that I'm imprisoned by it. I think I was imprisoned by it.
Remind them, what would your loved one want for you? And for me, that did it. That made it possible for me to go on.
And it's not something that we shouldn't share with people who are in the same situation that we were in and that we are in. And life can be good, and today is the best day of my life.
It's made me a better person. Yeah, he was my road to heaven. I needed work. Yeah. And it's true. It's true.
In the Jewish faith, there's a writing that says, against your will you were born into this world, and against your will you leave this world. So it's acknowledged that it's not an easy journey, this life.
Yeah. Nobody has come back to tell us, that's for sure. But you know what? There is a heaven, I truly believe. And if there isn't, I want my money back.